You can find and subscribe to the premium episodes of this podcast at pitch.supportingcast.fm.
This week's premium episode features Liana Ashton's feature script, The Nightingale Inn, and A. Noel Jackson's feature script, Rainfall. Make sure to check that out. Hi, and welcome to another episode of Pitch, Connecting Storytellers with the World. Today we have a very special guest with us, Stephen Hornyak, and I'm going to read this very impressive bio that he gave to me. So, Stephen has worked in the movie business for over 25 years as an actor, writer, and producer. On television, Steve has guest starred on many shows, including one of our favorites that we talked about, The X-Files.
Yes, The X-Files.
Southland, Scandal, Boston Legal, The Shield, and The Practice. Recently produced movies include Twisted Twin and Deadly Reunion for Lifetime Television, as well as a Hallmark movie entitled 5-Star Christmas, as well as the horror thriller film It Crawls Beneath, which we saw.
Oh, yeah.
So Steve has worked in movie and television research for over 10 years and has moderated focus groups on over 400 films, including Deadpool 1 and 2, Red Sparrow, Assassination Nation, Sicario, Soldado, Underwater, Spider-Man, Into the Spider-Verse, just to name a few.
Wow, I didn't think you were going to read that whole thing. I thought you were going to kind of improv it, but...
Oh, no,
Yeah, Leah goes hard on the intro.
I want to be thorough.
Thanks for coming out, man.
Really no worries. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah.
So we know each other recently, but the two of you know each other.
We go way back.
We do. Yeah, we haven't seen each other in years, really, until the last year or so. But we were in a play together at a acting studio.
20 years ago now. 21 years ago.
20 years ago.
It's 21 years ago.
Can't believe you admitted that.
Which is weird to say.
Angel was terrific in this. It was a version of
too kind.
Noises Off.
Noises Off, yeah.
He played the sexy director.
You played Selsden.
I played the old man, Selsden.
Yeah. Hilarious, yeah. Hilarious Selsden, yes.
Right. I didn't remember his name.
Yeah. Did I send you the picture? I found a picture on a 22-year-old laptop I found of us posing. I'll pull it up before you leave.
That's awesome.
It's great.
I'd like to see that.
Yeah. So we know each other from back in the day.
Right.
Yeah.
That's
and then
great.
how did Leah and Steve, how did you two meet?
You told me. You got in touch with me somehow.
Yeah, we connected through mutual friends who worked on a movie of yours. And they were like, you need to meet Stephen. He's such a good guy.
Who was that?
April and Alyssa.
April. Oh, yeah, sure.
Yeah. And I was like, I want to meet good people in the
April
industry.
Campion, right?
Yes, please. Yeah.
Shout out to April Campion.
Shout out.
Moving to New York soon.
It's a small world. It really is. I mean,
but I wouldn't want to paint it.
You wouldn't want
to paint it.
You wouldn't want to paint it.
That's an old Stephen Wright joke. You know that joke?
Is it? No.
It's a small world, but I wouldn't want to paint it.
That's good.
Because it's so dense.
It's
so complex.
Just a funny, weird joke.
I gotta look it up. So what do we have today? Because you've got a special. Not only are you a man of many talents and expertises, you've got a very unique set of experiences from where I'm coming from and where I think Leah's coming from as well, and maybe a lot of our audience members. And that is.
Well, I was just going to say a lot of people wouldn't even think of this as part of filmmaking, which they should.
But this is a huge part of filmmaking.
Yes.
And that part of filmmaking is audience testing.
Right.
Feedback.
Right.
From test audiences on almost finished products, almost finished films, right?
Right. Correct.
Ask my question?
Yeah, do you have a question?
I do. I have so many questions. Okay. Well, for the audience that doesn't know what that is, what is it?
Well, movie research is something that happened, I think really became prominent in the 70s. Actually, the first person to really want a movie tested in a statistical way was Francis Ford Coppola on Apocalypse Now.
Oh, wow.
Oh, wow.
And because it was such a behemoth of a movie, he really wanted to know if it worked and tracked and what it was like. So he started it again, but it's been apparently all these testing companies and all these statistical analysis companies have been trying to get into Hollywood for years before that. But he was the guy who kind of broke it wide open. Meanwhile, this is a tradition that goes back to Greek theater, right? So it's like testing something before you show it to the audience. So taking a play to Boston or New Hope, Pennsylvania, before you take it to New York and timing the jokes and rewriting and doing all that stuff that you do. It seems to be less especially for young filmmakers, it seems to be less palatable for them to do it. And I think people, they go to film school, they consider themselves auteurs, and everybody thinks they're Steve Jobs. You don't know what you need until I give it to you, right? That was Steve Jobs' thing. He didn't believe in any kind of research because he said the audience doesn't even know what we can do. So we're going to give them stuff they can't even dream about. And so I think that people get into that when they go to film school. In fact, I've had a lot of, because I was I have some colleagues that were much more experienced than I was, and I was the low guy in the totem pole for a while. I would do the small movies, the ones that were made by independents, or the ones that were picked up by a studio and then were tested. So you'd have a young filmmaker who made a film, raised money from his parents, his grandparents, whatever it might have been, and got lucky enough to be with the studio, right? And then get into this testing process and be in total shock and really snarky about it.
That they were even being asked to test, or what actually takes place during the testing process?
I think what takes place during the testing process. Okay. And so what happens is we've got an audience of 300 people. We go around and select 20 people to do the focus group afterwards. We sit down with them. I talk to them for 20 minutes to 40 minutes. And it's 20 people. But it's a good random sample of the 300 people that have seen the movie, right? But the big thing from young filmmakers is, why do I let 20 people decide what? Well, because it's statistically proven that these 20 people represent this audience, and then this 300-person audience represents the greater audience in America, blah, blah, blah. So what's the question?
Well, I want to pick up just a little bit. Is it random, the people that you pick? Or are you targeting certain ethnic groups or ages or genders?
It depends on the movie.
Okay.
Right. So, sometimes we'll have the Matt Damon movie where he was The Great Wall. Mm-hmm. For that focus group, we wanted some Chinese people in there, more than we would normally have. And we try to break something down into, the population has so many percentages whites, so many huge percent of Latinos now, blacks, Hispanics. I said Latinos. And so we try to make that, the whole audience is shaped that way, so that we're looking at really the American audience when we do a test. And then the 20 people represent that as well. So yes, there'll be different ethnicities, there'll be different, and again, depending on the film. Like if it's a horror movie, Hispanics tend to like horror movies more than the regular population, and blacks do as well. And so those focus groups are a little heavy in those areas because they're the ones who are really going to pay for the ticket.
This is so fascinating to me. Just to think that, one, this process is so robust. And does everything test? Does everything at a studio level test and network level test? Is that like...
Yeah, network level, certainly. We do TV testing as well. But I was mostly spent my time in the film division. And and nearly everything, especially what happens is... So you have a movie, right? And this young filmmaker has made this movie. And really the big thing we're looking at is market research. Like how do they put this movie out into the world, right? Mm-hmm. And so we're asking questions like, we get an audience, they're a section of the audience we know is gonna like this movie. So if we make a audience test on a horror movie, we'll put people in the audience that would never go see a horror movie.
That would be me. I wouldn't be in that 20-person pool right there.
Right, or even the whole audience at large. You don't want those people in there because and it's really the only genre that people out and out reject.
And they would skew what could otherwise be helpful feedback.
That's right. So you basically get a score, and the scores are like your grade scores in school. A 60 is a D, and a 70 is a C, and a B, 80 is a B, and a 90 is an A. But then, we had one movie, and I hope I can say this. I'm not really at liberty to talk about movies, but this is over now. And so Green Book scored a 100. It had a perfect score.
No way.
How often does that happen?
Not often.
Yeah.
My boss has been doing this for 30 years. It only happened one other time. I forget what the movie was.
I would like to know.
But, and so they knew they had something there. So what happens is now you have that 100-point score, the audience is going to like it. And you know that the demography of the audience is made up in a certain way that you're going to target those people in advertising. So let's say those people tended to be kind of upscale NPR listeners, that's where you do your advertising, as opposed to the Daily News or the New York Times or whatever it might be. You can tell I'm a little older because nobody, one of the big questions we ask on our focus group is, how do you get your movie knowledge? Like, how do you look up where movies are? And it's always the internet.
Yeah.
It's never a newspaper anymore.
Yeah.
It's, you guys know that already, of course.
But what a fascinating thing to say, we not only do we affect the shape of stories and potential reshoots, right?
That's correct.
We also then shape, via this process, how it's marketed and who it's marketed to.
That's right.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
And this is, like you said, there's a lot of younger, maybe earlier on in their career filmmakers who don't necessarily appreciate the value of this testing. But if you want your film to be seen by an audience as broad as possible or as specific as possible, this seems like it would be an invaluable part to add.
Right. And these young filmmakers, sometimes I'll say to them, well, what are you doing this for? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And they'll say, well, because, I make movies. No, wait, who are you doing this for? Mm-hmm. Well, we're doing it for an audience, right? So they have to be satisfied in some way. But I don't want to kowtow. You're not kowtowing. We've got this demographics all straightened out for this movie. We know these are the people that are poised to like it. Mm-hmm. Now you got to give them the satisfactory ending or the satisfactory beginning. And so that's basically it. And then also, I want to say this, because I know there's a lot of young filmmakers out there. Embrace this process. And the good ones, I've seen world-class filmmakers come in and fail. And they know they're going to fail. They put it in front of an audience and say, let's see what happens, right? And they have suspicions about the ending doesn't quite work and the middle is kind of weird. And they just, they get it. The older filmmakers get it. They've been doing it for a long time and they welcome the advice. Danny Boyle, as a matter of fact, is one of the guys who just loves the testing process. He also makes great movies. So kind of first time out, he gets good scores, but he wants to keep improving and tweaking and that kind of thing.
Yeah, this is fascinating to me because when I went into my board for my thesis for my MFA in poetry, that is a question that they ask you. Who is your audience? Because it matters. Because you're writing a book. Who is the book going to be for?
Right.
I'm reminded of a story, and I don't know if you're allowed to say the movie or not, so we can edit the movie out.
Okay.
But Get Out had an interesting story to it.
Yeah, actually, I can tell that story because Jason Blum, the producer of that, tells this story publicly as well. So, so what happened was on that movie was, I'm going to assume most of the audience has seen it.
Let's hope.
Spoilers.
Yes,
spoilers alert if you haven't seen Get Out from 2019, 2018, 2017?
Oh, God, before that, I think.
It's at least several years old. It's spoilers alert. It's on you if we spoil it for you.
Yes.
Yeah. So what happened was the ending of that, the movie was very satisfactory to the audience. But in the focus group, the movie scored quite low. And in the focus group, I was my boss, Kevin Getz, was doing that focus group, and he needed to find out why the scores were so low because it seemed like it was a satisfying movie. And he's been doing it for so long. He knew the vibe in the theater. People were liking it, and they wanted to like it, but there was something that was stopping them from liking it. And it was the ending. So if you guys remember, there's the guy and the girl are coming out of the house, and they're fighting. And they're in that car, and he's trying to escape, and she's trying to keep him there. And they're literally like fighting, like fist fighting.
Yeah, being dragged down the driveway.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So we see these red and blue lights flashing on them. Mm-hmm. We turn around, and in the movie, the version that everybody knows, it's the TSA guy.
It's his friend.
His buddy.
His friend has come to save the day, yeah.
Right. However, in the original version, it was the cop, the white cracker cop, who stopped them on the way up because a black guy was driving the car.
Okay.
I remember
and
that.
She says, he killed my family, he killed my dad, you got it, oh my God. And she's a little bloody from the whole thing, and he is as well. And he's a violent, crazy guy. And the last scene in the movie was that his TSA buddy came to the hospital, to the penitentiary and said, what the fuck happened? And he said, well, yeah, the white man got me. The man got me. And the audience, even whites and blacks, everyone, did not like that he didn't win. In some way, didn't get out of it in a way that was satisfactory to them.
It's too real.
Yeah, well, it's too real in a way,
It's too real, man.
Yeah.
It happens far too often.
in this version that we know, he triumphed. By the way, so we go back into the theater, they reshoot. Jordan Peele, to his credit, is one of those guys who's like, oh, okay. And he went off and wrote a new ending.
So you sussed out the problem, said, hey, Jordan, this is the problem.
Right.
He loses in the end. And then he came up with a solution?
Yes.
And
we never come up with a solution.
Okay.
What we're doing is always telling the filmmakers what the audience are saying. We don't put our opinion in there.
Okay.
It doesn't mean anything. Our opinion doesn't mean anything. And a lot of times, filmmakers will pull me aside and say, so what did you think? And I say, I really can't say. It's like, no, what did you think? I said, well, first of all, I'm 60 and I'm not your demographic. So I'm not going to like this movie out of the gate. So don't ask me, But you got to satisfy those people in their 30s who really would like this kind of movie.
Mm-hmm.
So you told him, hey, the audience loved the movie, but they hated the ending.
Yes.
And he's like, oh, okay, great. Well, I thought that ending would work. Now,
by the way, it's a little more complex than that because a full report gets written, all the statistical analysis is in the report.
Okay.
And then, of course, they do the focus group in front of the filmmakers, and they hear it right away. They hear from the audience like, the ending sucks. We don't like it. So that's what happens. It's not just we tell them. The audience is really telling them.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I mean, I could pick this apart, but
I'm tickled. I'm tickled at this process. Like it's so. I understand both sides of it. I'm an auteur. This is like I decide, right? But then the further along I get, I'm like, I have to make sure my audience is cared for because what the hell else am I doing this for?
Right.
And if I'm not doing it for them, then why am I putting this out into the world?
well, that's something that we're taught to include in the script, right? What are the moments that you're giving the audience? How do you want the audience to feel?
Yeah.
Right.
And we had a conversation a year ago, and I was like, I'm rethinking about directing, right? If you're directing a film, what are you actually directing? On a certain level, you're directing the audience's emotional experience.
Yeah.
And
that's a good way to say it.
That has to be early on in your for me at least, in my writing process and my conception of a story. I'm like, what am I taking? What do I want the audience to feel here? And how do I complicate that? And then how do I surprise them? So I'm literally directing both the images and the actors and the camera, but I'm also directing the audience to cry here or to laugh here.
Right.
And without that piece of the puzzle, I think you're missing some things. And you're saying the process by which testing happens after the film is made is it's not even like a polish. It's kind of like baking the thing and ensuring that there's no missed ingredients based on the feedback of who's going to consume it.
Right.
I'm like so excited about this.
Yes.
We need to find a way to do this process in the script stage.
There is a process, and I'm not gonna reveal the entire thing, but I worked with a screenwriting guru, and he actually has this process. It's just a little bit trickier, I think, because asking people to read screenplays in this town is a difficult. Yeah, like Steven's nodding, Leah's laughing.
You know what? Well, here's the thing. I'm a slow reader.
Yeah.
I've always been a slow reader, over the years, I think it would get better as I read more and more. It just doesn't. I'm a slow reader. I comprehend at a certain rate.
Sure. Yeah.
So it takes me a while to read a screenplay, make notes at the same time. So by the time the whole thing, and then do a write-up on it or something, I'm 4 hours in on something like that. It's a half a day's worth of work.
And it's also like, you're not like walking through a beautiful home saying, oh, this home is so beautiful. I can oh, maybe the ceilings are a little low. You're like reading a blueprint. You're reading an architectural like document. So then to decipher that at a high level and to give notes and feedback on that at a high level isn't the most enjoyable thing for most scripts, because I think most scripts aren't enjoyable, which is part of the problem when you're like, hey, will you read my script and give me feedback? It's like, how many times have someone asked you that and you've gotten a script that you're like, oh God, 10 pages in, I got to finish this thing because it's not an enjoyable experience.
Yeah.
So it's a tedious, tentative process to be
It's
like,
also
hey,
it's not a written art form.
Yeah.
It's a filmed art form. It's pictures. It's not words.
Yeah.
Right? Well, it's words and dialogue and stuff. But so, we're already kind of one step away from what the thing is. So we have to get through this process of reading something and creating it on a page before it goes to a camera.
It's a much less enjoyable process to have 300 people read your screenplay than have 300 people sit and watch a movie.
Yeah.
You know?
Right.
It's like, do you want to eat all the ingredients one by one, or do you want to like eat the dessert and fancy meal?
Always the dessert. But
there is, I've heard of a process that you script test, and it is actually not dissimilar to what you've described. It's just you got to find the people willing to do it for you. And that's where the power of your network comes in. And we've talked about this. You just don't remember.
And you're getting 6, 8, 10, 15, 20 people to read it?
If you can, yes. Right. But the trick is to remove the writer from the feedback process. Just like you're a proxy for the filmmaker, right?
That's
the
correct.
filmmaker isn't in there saying, hey, what did you think of my film?
Right.
Which then can intimidate an audience member to be like, well, I loved your film. You are a third party who has no bias or opinion about it. You're like, hey, I just want to know what you think about that other person's film. I don't think anything. So you can be honest with me. You can be free. Please speak freely. This is a necessary part of the process.
Yeah. Also, by extension, too. I mean, I did the very first Creed movie.
Okay.
And so I'm with Stallone. My boss is doing the focus group, and he's dissatisfied with what he's getting from the focus group. And he says, "Should I go down there?" And I said,
"Stallone is, or your boss?"
Stallone says, "Should I go down?" And I said, "If you want, I'm not going to tell you what to do." And he turned to another producer and he said, "Should I go down there?" And the guy's like, "No." So I don't go down there. And he looks at me again. He says, "Should I?" I said, "If you want, go for it." He goes down to the front of this focus group, and the group just goes wild. I mean, they're just insane. And by the way, this is a man in his 70s now, He was at that time, maybe late 60s, early 70s. And he is so beloved. It's incredible. They're like, "Please keep making movies. Don't stop. We really love you." And of course, this whole kind of wave of the Creed thing was such an amazing thing to extend the Rocky story without being another Rocky in a fight.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's kind of a brilliant thing. I think Ryan Coogler actually pitched that to Stallone. He was the one who pitched that idea of Creed having an illegitimate kid, and
Yeah.
So anyway, Sly gets up there. What happens though in the group is that they just love him so much. He's not getting honest answers from them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the rub.
Yes.
You need the honest answers.
Yeah.
You need a proxy, which is why
So
the
we
process
hide filmmakers. We hide well-known filmmakers. We hide them. We don't bring them to the theater with the audience, where the audience can see. The lights go down. We bring them in afterwards. And so movie stars do that as well. Movie stars who have produced movies. It completely affects the results of the test if you have someone there that's well-known and the audience loves or hates or whatever. It's just,
What is the name of your company?
It's called Screen Engine, ASI. And by the way, we do a form of script testing that we just started to do.
Oh, cool.
And, for years, there have been dial tests. You know what that is?
No, what's a dial test?
Television has always done these dial tests. Basically, it's an electronic dial that you're sitting in an audience and you turn it when you like something to the right. And if you don't like it, you turn it back to the left. And so you're doing that constantly throughout watching the television show. And then what happens is it's reading this thing, and it's kind of like an EKG of the movie comes up. So you get to see all these highs and lows, and we see this kind of squiggly line, like an EKG line, right?
Yeah.
And so there's highs, and lows. Now, of course, you want highs and lows in a movie. That, to a certain extent, stories go to high points and low points, right? So there's that, but there's also like not liking. So what happens is we look at that graph at the end, and we go and do the focus group, and we say, okay, at this point, so-and-so did this, this, and this. Why did you guys turn your dial down so much? I just couldn't stand that character. I hated that character. Not that it was something to do with the story. So it could be any number of things, right? And by the time, now in television, you can be replaced, right? And this is this whole thing that actors go, well, the testing audience didn't really like you, so we have to fire you and bring in somebody else, And having been an actor, that's a tough thing to hear.
Yeah.
I mean, to get that job is a crazy amount of work and preparation.
Just to be an actor and to not give up.
Yes.
Is a feat of endurance and strength.
Yep.
Yeah. So then to hear that from a testing audience must be equally devastating.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. This is amazing. What do you got?
Well, what's the script version of what you're doing?
So we use that dials, and we put an audience, excuse me, we have an audience of about 48 people. There's, in this little theater we have in the Valley, and we give them a dial, and the script is read by actors, and they're doing the dial test as if it's a movie.
No way. So you've got like a live staged reading of a screenplay.
Right.
With people...
With the EKG thing going, like at the end of it, there's this EKG, like just as if it's a movie, right? So I had a filmmaker, great filmmakers, terrific guys. We actually did a beta test of this product, and we gave them this test, and so this movie is about a kid who's schizophrenic, and he was had a lot of trouble, but he got on this medication. You guys remember the old film Charlie? Remember that movie Charlie?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
The book was Flowers for Algernon. Became Charlie. It was Cliff Robertson played Charlie. Very similar to what happened because this guy had this schizophrenia in this movie and got this medication. And suddenly he was normal. Mm-hmm. And he went to a regular high school. He got a girlfriend, and got really involved with her. And then the medication started to wear off, or something tricky happened, and he started to do backsliding. Right. So, meanwhile, his mother is married to a new guy. He's 15 or 16 years old, but she's married to a new guy, and she's young enough to have kids with him, and they want to have a baby, and she gets pregnant during the course of the movie. And the last scene of the movie is his mother trusting him enough to hold the baby. Audience hated it. This is not a movie now. This is in script form.
Okay.
So I did the folk script. I said, well, what would you prefer? And they came up with this. Also, he was a chef. So he wanted to work in restaurants. He wanted to cook. And that's how he kind of landed his girlfriend. He started cooking for her, and she, of course, fell for him. So anyway, they said, we want to see him in a restaurant with knives, doing his deal, and being a chef. And folks group ended. Filmmakers come in and said, oh, my God. Oh, you just saved us so much money. Well, I mean, our company, right? Saved you so much money. We would have had to reshoot that scene because they would have hated it. And now we don't have to do it. And that scene ended up as the one that the audience picked ended up as the final scene of the movie. And it was very satisfying.
Incredible. How do you find the scripts, or do they approach you?
Yeah, it's a fairly new product, so we're kind of approaching people, and they don't even know what it is, you know. And of course, everybody's a little bit trepidatious, to put their stuff out there in front of a live audience. So people will come to us, and basically it's our clients who make movies. We go, let's back time this a few steps, and let's work on the script first with an audience, and then you'll get some real intel about what's working and what's not. Now, conversely, I mean, there was one project we did, I won't say the name of, but it was, they were having a lot of arguments across the development table, and they decided to test it with us. And
this is at the script phase.
The script phase.
Okay.
And the writer was a terrific gal, and it was a fun movie, but the audience didn't like it at all. They really did not like it. So what ended up happening, unfortunately, was the whole thing fell apart. Now, we're not in the business to make movies fall apart. We're in the business to make movies, quality movies, right? Help people make quality movies.
But the script testing process in this instance helped precipitate it falling apart,
Yes.
even though there was problems prior.
Right.
Okay, but this hastened it.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Right, and also they didn't spend, $10 million in this movie and find out later on that it didn't really work that well.
Yeah.
And then, you're also good money chasing bad after a while, because sometimes, you get into making a movie and it's like, okay, we got to do reshoots. Then we go again, it's like, oh, we got to do reshoots again. And because my boss, Kevin Getz, I'll say his name again, has been doing this for such a long time, and I've been doing it for a while now too, is that we can actually tell that there's a problem that they can't solve in reshoots, right? And that problem may be that just like the lead actor is not, they don't like him. And you can't solve that in reshoots because, you've put this actor on it who you've paid millions of dollars to be in this movie, and they're popular, but this particular role, they're not that right in. This happens quite a bit with comedians who make the transition into dramatic stuff. A lot of them do it very well, but I've been involved in things where, comedians come in and been in a horror movie, and it's just like people hate them. And the whole thing, doesn't make any money because it's...
Well, what happened with the woman's script that bombed?
Say again?
What happened with the woman's script that didn't do so well with the audience testing? Did they rewrite it, or did they just give up?
No, they basically, the people that the company that was doing it, basically, a couple days after the reading said, I don't think we're going to pursue this. It just doesn't quite work for us.
Wow.
Yeah. It was a movie about people who decided to become swingers.
Okay.
In their 40s because they were a little bored with their lives. And boy, people didn't like that. It just became, it's a cool concept, and it could be a lot of fun and a lot of hijinks with sexual hijinks and stuff like that. But it had a quality to it that was too, people reject swinging, right? They just reject it.
It's not it's in America, in this climate, it's
right.
not.
No, it's not common.
Yeah, I mean, because it goes against the traditional American dream, which is have a family, have kids,
Yeah,
school, work,
exactly.
not have a family and have fun.
maybe you need to revive it. Have a family and
Leah
have
said
fun.
with a twinkle in her eye.
Yeah, that's the title of the script. It'll be really big in Germany.
Family and fun.
Family fun. Do you have more questions about the audience testing?
I have so many questions, but I know you've got stuff prepared, so
I
by all
do.
means, fire away.
Are you sure? Okay.
Yeah.
So you're producing stuff. People are pitching to you. I know we had a lunch, I
Right.
think the first time that we met.
Yes.
What makes a good pitch, in your objective opinion?
You know, from all the experience with testing and then hearing pitches, the biggest thing is the premise.
Yeah.
I mean, a premise that's really, you can encapsulize in a couple of sentences. Remember that movie Indecent Proposal?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Well, years ago, my wife actually auditioned for that movie, and she got the script or something, and we were aware of what the premise was. Would you let someone sleep with your wife for $1 million?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and you're financially struggling as a couple.
Yeah, but not even take that out of it
Okay.
for a second, right? Because what happened was when people heard about that premise and the advertising and stuff, even before it was made, people were talking about it because anybody who came in contact with it, like, oh my God, would you let that happen? Would you? And then you start having all these considerations. Well, I could buy that house I've always wanted, but I'm compromising my, and so people, when the movie came out, they're around the water cooler talking about, would you, wouldn't you? And and the guy from accounting is going, of course I would. Of course she would. She'd do her duty. She'd do it. And the other guy's going, oh, no, I would never do that to my wife. So it became this big debate, right? So really compelling premise.
Yeah.
And so right away, people wanted to see it even before it was made. So that's kind of what you have to do. You have to give us something that's so compelling that people want to see it even before you've written a script, let's say.
I love this because it's like it presents a question that you can ask yourself and you can ask other people that gets you talking. And it's a very pointed of the world question.
Yeah, it's a universal quandary for everybody.
Yeah. I mean, of the world in the script.
So wait, say that again?
Yeah, I'm not quite sure what you mean.
Oh, because the whole premise of the film is, would you let your wife do this? So that is the question of the world that has to be answered, and all of the
film.
moral dynamics that go along with it. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. That's the like core of that particular story.
Right.
Yes.
And actually, what's happening around the water cooler is people are imagining how it shakes out. Mm-hmm. Right. So then we're gonna go to the theater now and see how it shook out.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, that's great because then you can start a log line with, well, what would you do?
That's a great way to start a log line. What
Yeah.
would you do if?
Are
Right.
Are you taking notes? You guys
we
taking
just-
One of
notes?
the
yeah.
log lines for what's the thing with Bradley Cooper? Unstoppable, what was it?
Limitless?
Limitless. I was going to say immeasurable.
And the question was, what if you could take a pill that would make you smarter?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, who wouldn't want to be smarter,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. This goes back to like high concept, right?
Right.
High concepts or like a compelling, easy to grasp premise,
Right.
which you're
If
saying
it's
is
easy
like
to grasp in a pitch meeting, it's easy to grasp in a script, it's easy to grasp in a theater, it's easy to grasp in advertising, which is really what you want. It's easy to grasp when somebody, the log line says, would you let somebody sleep with your wife for $1 million on the poster of the movie, right? And it's just like so compelling.
Yeah.
So it's compelling to an audience at that stage. It has to be compelling to the guy sitting in the development chair.
There's that word again, compelling.
compelling, yeah.
Yeah. I would love to have been in the pitch meeting for Indecent Proposal because I imagine it started with that question. And you can go around the room, like Mercedes said, she starts her pitches with a question.
Yeah.
You go around the room and you can ask and be like, well, you all answered this, but this is what happens in the movie. Because the instant that you get people talking about your script is the instant that you have them.
It also is like, how do you find story ideas is a question. You said in a prior episode, have you been watching anything on TV that has inspired your writing? And I said no, and then I contradicted myself. I was like, actually, one of the novel I'm working on is like, what happens if you have this combined with this, right? Like, like how do you mix these two things? And I gave the generic example of like Married with Children, except they're on a boat, which is not a great example. But if you were to say, all right, well,
no, I mean, that's a pretty good example. I mean, married with children who are at each other's throats all the time, right?
Yeah.
Now they're in a contained space in the middle of the ocean.
Yeah, there's no escape.
So there's no escape. That's kind of cool.
Steven just wrote the next thriller film he's going to produce.
Thriller premise on a planet. That is not an indication. But what you're saying is, this question is like, how do you conceive stories, right? How do you conceive stories that are fit for the screen? Because there are certain criteria that you need to meet, right? Mm-hmm. You can't write a movie script the same way you can write a novel. There's different requirements, I think, although some people would say storytelling is storytelling through and through. What is the nugget, the core? What is the high concept question? Like, would you allow your spouse to sleep with someone else for $1 million? That's a high concept, right?
Right. It's not going to work for every movie.
And then basing a story around that. And you're right, it's not going to work for every movie. But For Indecent Proposal was, the biggest movie of that year.
Probably.
By far.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't recall, but yeah, probably.
So let me ask you, where do you find stuff to produce? So John Zalzerny said he's reading The Blacklist. He finds people through Coverfly or roadmap writers.
Recommendations from friends, etc.
How about you?
Well, when you have a company and you're in development, people will approach you, right? Mm-hmm. But I'll give you an example of something that happened to me recently because I'm with my former company, but I'm also out on my own. So a writer from Great Britain got my email and emailed me. Now I don't take unsolicited material, so because you could potentially be sued, right? So this guy contacted me. I said, I have this idea, and he gave me a little outline of it. I said, you gotta, if you have an agent, make them send it to me. A couple of days later, and because it's Great Britain, a couple of days later, it probably would have been, hours later, I got the submission from his agent. I read it. I don't like it all that much. Mm-hmm. And I say, this is not something for me. But since he's taken the time, the guy found my email. I don't know how he did it, but he did, right? So I'm like, this guy's got a little tenacity. Let's give him a little bit more credit than just no to this particular premise, right? So I said, what else do you have? I'm looking for the stuff I'm doing right now is very small scale. And he was pitching me big movies, And, for me at this stage in my career to make a $70 million or $100 million movie, that's not going to happen with me. You're better off trying to go to somebody else than me.
Yeah.
And I'm honest about that because I don't want to take a premise that I can't get made, right? And hold it up for somebody for years and years and years. So basically, I said, I'm looking for one location things, but justified one location. Because this idea of one location movies, you see these movies a lot where there's a house that's haunted and this young couple moves from the city to the country, buys this house, and they're mortgaged up to the gills. So now they get in that house and this weird shit starts to happen, but they're not leaving because their mortgage is so high and because they can't afford to live anyplace else. And that's just not a good excuse for me as a viewer to be watching this and going, oh, well, they're staying because of the money. It just doesn't make sense when suddenly, like, somebody's coming at you with a knife, for Christ's sake.
Yeah.
So it justified one location.
Sure.
So a couple of days later, he sends me 10 one-liners for one location movies. And one of them was in space, in a particular kind of spaceship, very contained. Heavy special effects, but very contained. So I said, yeah, let's try to develop this. And I said, now, I'm a development guy that I don't have my own fund now in this particular, nor do I have it in my other company, but I don't have my own fund. So I'm not paying for scripts. I'm not paying for treatments or anything like that. So if you want to do a one-page on it, and I'll take it, and we'll cut a little deal. I'll just do a right-to-shop agreement on it, and I'll kind of put it in my arsenal of stuff that when I'm going around town and talking to people, I'll say, hey, I've got this one location thriller in space, and it's this, this, and this. And so now I've got that in my, he hasn't written it yet, but I will have that in my kind of pitch materials, right? When I'm looking at, and here's the thing, I mean, part of it for me is looking for a variety of stuff and being able to fill needs that people have. Like a friend of mine recently said, you got to bring me some faith movies, anything faith. Now, it's not a genre that I've really worked in or have paid that much attention to, but now I'm starting to look at faith stuff. I've been asking people about faith movies, and I was about to say it's kind of low-hanging fruit, but there's no such thing as low-hanging fruit in the movie business. You know, everything. I've made Lifetime movies. People consider that low-hanging fruit. It's not. It's highly competitive, and it's highly competitive because it's a way that people get in, and so everybody and their brother wants to write a Lifetime movie. And not many people really know how to do it. They watch them, they see a lot of them, but they don't really know how to. They don't really get it.
Yeah, I pitched for a Lifetime movie once, and I wrote the script.
You wrote the script.
I wrote the script. I pitched it to a producer. She was asking for it. She liked the concept. She read the script. She's like, no. I was like, okay.
You got to script test it next time.
I had to script test it. But I took that script to Katrina Mercedes, and we zhuzhed it up into something else, and hopefully they get to make it.
So this person found you, but that doesn't answer how you're finding other projects. Then.
Yeah, I mean,
you did the opposite.
Well, yeah, because
you're just a magnet at this point. Because
here's the thing. In our company where we've produced the 4 movies, we haven't really ever pursued agents. Like, we haven't called agents and said, give me what you have in this genre, send over some premises. Because when you start to get involved with agents, it becomes a very different thing. Now, God bless agents and writers and how, making money and all that stuff. It's great. But at my stage, or where I am right now with going out on my own, I'm not paying for stuff. I'm just not. So I'm not putting myself out there in terms of like, I need this, and this from agents, because there's an expectation that, okay, and rightfully so, it's so much money for the treatment, and there's so much money for the first draft and the second draft. So, and it becomes, the money starts to pile up. And even, we're not talking about big dollars here. We're talking about, like, at the end of the entire process, maybe it's $50,000.
Yeah.
But it's not $50,000 I want to spend on something I don't really know what's going to happen with.
So you're taking a script or you're taking ideas, you're taking one page, and you're going around as a producer and a distributor in order to find money to get it made?
Distributor?
Did you say distribution? Or did you just say producing? Okay.
Did I say distribution? No, I don't think I did.
I didn't hear distribution.
Sorry. I misheard. So you're taking the script out as a producer, trying to find funding to get it made. Copy.
Right. But it's, that's not really quite what I do. I mean, it's more like I have this 6 or 8 things that I have of material, right? And I'm looking to plug it in places, and I'm looking to plug it in with what people need, rather than like trying to raise money on my own and make a movie. I'm going to tell you a story.
Good.
I'm not going to. I'm not going to say the name of this movie.
Even better.
What's that?
Even better.
Yeah, the audience loves a mystery.
So this thing was billed as the unofficial sequel to Braveheart. Okay. So I'm in the office, and they say, you're going to go do this test tonight on this film that's an unofficial sequel to Braveheart. I'm like, wow, that's cool. Everybody loves Braveheart, right?
Yeah.
So I get there. I meet the financier. Boy, I may be in dicey territory. And he tells me how much money he spent on this movie. And I'm like, like I almost,
You gasped out loud?
No, I almost did though. It felt like, and so run the movie, and it just scores in the dumps. It's just terrible. And they don't have enough money to do the action. And here's the other thing. There's a thing that we really work on a lot in audience testing is like expectation and result. So sometimes, like I did the screening of Anchorman 2, right? So I got up and sometimes the audience comes in blind, they don't know what they're seeing. So I said, you're going to see a very special movie tonight. We've been waiting a long time for this. It's Anchorman 2. The audience went wild.
I was in the audience.
Were you really?
You were in the audience for that?
In Woodland Hills?
Yes.
Oh my God, that's funny. It was me? You saw me?
I think it was you. The audience's reaction was like at a 10 almost the whole time.
Oh my God.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And they did not stop laughing.
Yeah.
So,
wow, small world.
But one of the questions I asked in the focus group is, okay, so I say Anchorman 2 at the beginning of the movie. There's a huge expectation attached to that.
Sure.
Was the result satisfying? Was it
met,
below your
exceeded?
expectations, above your expectations, or in line with your expectations? And that movie actually exceeded people's expectations.
They were laughing so hard, I missed jokes.
Oh my God, it was such a thrill to be in that theater.
It was a riot. I was there. I was totally there.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I was not. I feel left out.
I lived in Woodland Hills area at the time.
Yeah,
so
I took a side.
Yeah, you started talking about the unofficial sequel to a movie.
Oh yeah. So I mean, and this guy,
the financier,
was a mortgage broker who wanted to get in the movie business, and he found these guys, or they found him, and he spent a ton of money on something that is not even going to make... I saw it years later on Netflix, and Netflix did not pay them any money for this movie. Certainly not anywhere near what was spent on it.
They should have script tested with you.
They should have.
Yep.
Yeah.
Were there any surprises? Have you ever tested a movie and either the filmmaker doesn't fix the parts that the audience is saying should be fixed, and then it comes out and then you're like, well, that audience was wrong. This movie is great or beloved. Or you've seen something that like the audience was like, fix it, the filmmaker did it, and then it didn't work. Have there been any surprises, basically? And that's actually where we're going to call it for this week's episode. If you're enjoying our chat with Stephen and you want to hear his answer to my question, does audience testing ever not work? Make sure to check out next week's episode where we go even further down the rabbit hole on all things audience testing. On behalf of myself, Leah, and Stephen Hornyak, thanks for listening. Cheers from Hollywood. If you're on the fence about subscribing, know that a portion of all subscription fees go toward the nonprofit Young Storytellers, raising voices one story at a time.